Have you got your tickets yet for our big bus trip to Newcastle to see the West Tigers take on the Newcastle Knights? We'd love it if you could join us. We're going to be leaving from Lamia, picking up in Concord, having some lunch along the way, and then going to McDonald Jones Stadium to see the Tigers take on the Knights on the 11th of August. It's a Sunday afternoon game, and we'd love it if you could join us. There are only a limited number of seats available on the coach. It's going to be a great day. If you'd like to book your place, head to westtigerspodcast.com.au and click on Game Day Coach Transfers. Pop your details in and you'll be on the bus. Hope to see you on the 11th of August.
Lovely ball. Caesar for Olam. Back on the angle. The Tigers, they hit back. Leichhardt erupts. What a ball it was from Caesar. Coruscant here. The Tigers 25 away from the Titans line. Good ball from Caesar. Fainu goes over the top of four and gives it to Justin Olam. Sliding into your lounge room. Last play, it's Coruscant. Big dummy. A kick through. Cleaned up by the Tigers. Cleaned up by Fanua Bolle. A ricochet. Bolle scores. The Tigers lead by 6.
It's the West Tigers podcast, episode number 336, and a rare occurrence. It's a post-victory edition of the West Tigers podcast. The Tigers beating the Titans 18 points to 10 at Leichhardt Oval after trailing 10 points to 6 at half-time. We'll have a look at that game in a few moments' time. But first of all, the one-word contributions from the ever-growing member base at the West Tigers podcast forum. We've got Snake, and Snake's one word was an easy one. Yes. Canberra Tiger, relief. Yeah, we're all feeling some relief. I bet you the club's feeling some relief too, Canberra Tiger. Tiger Ton, gutsy. Tigersman, deserved. There was adversity, but we overcame it by effort and team spirit. Mike's one word was juniors, the future of the club. Dirty Reds opted for heart. Our guys dug deep in that game against the Gold Coast. Daniel, 67, is a new member. Daniel's word was mature. In other words, less immature mistakes, which is good. Welcome, Daniel. Eastie Magpie, Melbourne. We hung in there like they seem to do. Good one. Yep. Jedi Tiger, Leichhardt Magic. Natmac 78 went for home. It's good to have a proper home and a hard-fought win. Tiger 5150, their word was character. Lots of character shown by the Tigers. Cade's 79 is also new. Cade's word was spirit. The whole team showed it, especially the young ones. Lorenzo said exuberance. Every player showed it. Chook went for scramble. First up defence was sometimes not great, but we did do a good job with our scrambling defence. Matt V. Tigers' one word was professional, the opposite of last week. I've had to go over the page. There's so many contributions this week. Rachel 9's word was discipline. Russ Tuddy 63, their word was control. Having halves that can control a game makes a big difference. And that was the same word that Russ Tuddy 63 used last week when he said we had no control in the halves. So that was definitely a turnaround. Tristo is also new. I should say Russ Tuddy also went for teenagers. Congrats to them. Congrats to all the debutants that we've had in recent times. Tristo, as I said, is new to the forum. 70 minutes. We're still not able to play for the full 80. And Logan R21 Tribal. It's a shame Leichhardt isn't our home. I've got 3 one-words. I just can't seem to trim it down to one, but I'm not going with physicality this week. Physicality is out. Let's say hello to Eddie Otto first of all. Eddie, your one word, please.
Relief, Joel. Just relief. Relief for the fans. Relief for players, coaches, and relief for the club because, it just resets the clock. You know, it gives everyone a chance to breathe a little bit because there are going to be more losses to come, but it's not going to be 10, 11, 12, 13 in a row. So just sheer relief for me.
Declan is back from his search for the Loch Ness Monster back in Scotland. Good to see you, Declan. What's your one word, please?
I think I've got 2 words, and that's 18 points. We finally found a team that we kept under 18 points, and I think that although a lot of the cracks that we've seen the last few weeks have been there, like because the Titans weren't able to score and we were able to defend, we managed to scrape out the win. So yeah, and also relief and Leichhardt Oval. I mean, geez, I don't think we would have won that game anywhere else except for our spiritual home ground.
And Gary's fresh from the upper echelon, been mixing with the big wigs up in the top part of the Latcham Robinson grandstand. How are you, Gary? What's your one word, please?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Joel. Evening, guys. I'm going to go with resilience, and for multiple reasons. I think 9 weeks of losses in a row, so 9 games we've lost in a row, the resilience to overcome that. I think the resilience to overcome having 3 or 4 debutants in the side, guys who haven't won games before. I think there was 5 players yesterday who got their first ever win for the West Tigers. So the resilience to overcome that. One of the youngest sides put out on the field in the NRL, the resilience to overcome that. And the defence at the end of that game, when the Gold Coast were starting to come back into that game, and add in the scramble word that someone used, I thought the resilience to hold the Gold Coast out when they started to come back for a side that looked like we were discussing last week had the effort bubble had burst, and to turn around and put that effort in yesterday in a game that was not a pretty game. I don't think it was a fantastic game of football. I don't think we played amazing football, but there's a lot of character and a lot of resilience in that game yesterday.
Yeah, you could probably say at different times in the season we've probably played better football, but we managed to eke out that win, which is what the good teams do. They do tend to convert those kinds of games into victories. I've gone for relief as well. That's on the top of my page. I've got youth with 9 players under 23. That's a pretty big effort. But my one word is just turnaround. Like, what a turnaround it is in a week. We did this edition of the pod, I think it was Monday night last week, and we were all pretty down and pretty depressed. Things were pretty bleak in Tiger Town, but there's been a bit of a turnaround this week. I mean, we've got the Lachlan Galvin situation that we'll talk about. Of course, we had the win, Richardson's rant that we'll talk about, and also, which I was really glad to see. And also, if you're a Tigers fan and you watch that Penrith game today, you can't help but feel a little bit excited about the guy that was wearing the number 7 jersey for Penrith, who will be here for the next 5 years from next year. So, things are looking a little bit brighter. Maybe not so bright news, though. The New South Wales team has just been named. Stefano and also Appy not in Michael Maguire's team. So that probably does bring to light that Stefano situation a little bit more. I wanted to start, Eddie, I'll go straight back to you. It was a terrible start to the game for the Tigers. I've got here, like in the first 6 minutes, they broke us twice on our left, and they got that try. They kicked a 40-20. It was a shocking start to the game. So if we talk about adversity and resilience, sometimes, or maybe you could say that it was fortunate, I suppose, that happened right at the beginning of the game with it, and we were able to wrestle back some momentum, whereas sometimes if what's happened to us in the past this year is that's happened to us just after halftime, and we tend to have fallen apart. But it was a poor start. I think we were all going, "Oh my goodness, this is not looking good."
The main thing going into that game I was worried about was the speed of the Titans. And in the first 10 minutes, I thought, okay, they're going to blow us away, because it was obvious that Des Hasler had come with a plan to shift the ball, especially to that makeshift side with Fatape defending on the wing. And, it was 3 line breaks in the first 5 minutes. They really shot themselves in the foot. It was a miracle that we were down 10-6 only at halftime into that wind. And that was partly due to some resilience, but partly due to their boneheaded play. My mate who I was sitting with at the game said it's about time we had a little bit of luck, because the ball never really bounces for us. And, they bombed some opportunities and we hung in there. And confidence would have grown from that first half, because the Titans dominated all the stats and we were only down 4.
It was a nice try, that first try for the Tigers. Aiden Caesar with the ball to Olam. I thought it was, although he seems to be injured, Declan, I thought Justin Olam, obviously he got the couple of tries, but he made the difference that you'd expect from a guy that's won premierships and is as experienced as he is. Like, he stepped up, I thought.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at towards the end of the game, he was limping, and even when he was limping, he was still taking up head up. So it's clear that needs still a bit of an issue for him. But yeah, I thought he played fantastic. Your leader to play well every single weekend. And yeah, he was hitting well as well. I think he had some really good shots on that edge. He kind of jammed in a little bit in the first half, which opened up a space. But other than that, I thought he was really, really good. He combined really well with Caesar. And yeah, I think that whenever he makes big hits like that, I think it kind of galvanizes the group, but then the other players as well. And I think that was one of his better games for us this season.
For me, a big part of us being able to shore up that left-hand side defence was Olam. The Gold Coast went there a number of times, as you guys said, in that first 5 to 10 minutes, but they didn't seem to go back there too often throughout the rest of the match. I think a lot of that was because whenever they went back there later in the game, Olam was hitting really hard and jamming in and hitting those centres, and I think it made the Gold Coast a little bit more reluctant to go to that side. So I thought that he really helped shore that up, despite early being involved in actually coming in a little bit too far and opening up those edges early in the game. I thought he was able to shore it up, especially with his hard hitting.
You could tell that, or I would suggest, or I'd guess that Des Hasler looked at the team and saw Fatape on the wing and thought that's potentially a vulnerability there. He's played in the centres before, and that was exposed a bit. And having Olam there and stepping up, they did tend to. I thought maybe they might have actually moved Fatape off that wing, but he stayed there for the full match. Made a couple of mistakes and a couple of defensive errors, but not a winger, I think, by trade. I thought the one of the big turning points in the game, there was that bad miss. I thought we were going to fall apart when Pole and Matamua missed that tackle, which the Titans went straight through. I think it was about 20 minutes. But 5 minutes later, they burnt their challenge, the Titans. And I thought, that's maybe we're maybe in this. Yeah, and that did come back to haunt them with that later on. The first half saw Miller come on, and we've spoken a little bit about Jordan Miller over the time. He's, I think, 19, Declan. I think that's where he's at the moment. He's still got that boy kind of body. What did you think of his debut?
I thought it was there was some promising signs. I think with the ball, I think we can all kind of see he's kind of got the athleticism to become a first grade player. I think he's a bit raw at the moment. I think he could probably do with a little bit more conditioning. I was actually watching the game back on the TV, and you could hear Chris Hyington just screaming out, only 2 more tackles, Jordan, before he got subbed off. So you could tell that he was gassed and he didn't really play that long. So conditioning is still clearly something he needs to work on. And he was probably thrown in, sooner than he was probably ready. But you can definitely see the talent there. And, I'm sure we'll talk about it with Stefano looking likely out the door. Maybe he could be someone who could step into that kind of role, because he's a huge dude. Like the Titans are a big pack, but he kind of monstered them in terms of size. And if you can just get that fitness up, I think he could be a really good player. And the offload didn't really come for him this game because he wrapped him up pretty well. But the more first grade he plays, the more confidence he gets. I could really see him being someone who can make that second phase play happen for us. But yeah, conditioning for sure has got to improve. But some good first signs from him for me.
He seemed to be looking for the offload every time he had the ball, which was promising. It's actually something we haven't had very much in our arsenal this year, is having someone that can throw a good offload. Gary?
Yeah, it's probably something we need to incorporate to break up those defences a little bit more. But I also think a lot of credit does need to go to Jordan Miller and to the rest of the bench. My biggest concern going into that match was that bench we had, a very inexperienced bench. I know Seyfarth moved back to the bench to kind of put a little bit more experience up there and balance the side out a little bit. But I was very concerned going into that game that once our starting props went off, how Seyfarth, Porter, and the rest of that bench were going to cope. And I thought they hung in really well. I'm not going to say they went out there and they dominated the game, but their ability to hang in that game and keep us in that game, I think, needs to be commended, because it was a very inexperienced bench, and guys like Jordan Miller did a great job during that period of the game where we were resting those starting props.
Yeah, I also want to give Talon DaSilva a big shout out. I thought he was incredible for a hooker coming, his first start in his career pretty much, and he played, I think, 50 minutes straight. And I was actually surprised that he did miss a few tackles, but actually just watching the game, I couldn't think of any tackles that he missed, and I thought that he did a great job for someone so young in his career, and hopefully the more experience he gets, we can start to see more of that running game. But defensively and physically, I thought he looked like a first grader, which was a lot different to last year, where you could tell he was kind of pushed a little bit, before he was actually ready. But it was the complete opposite this time around.
I think he didn't necessarily miss tackles, but he got pushed off a couple of times when he was going in for the tackle. But that's something that you can definitely work on. But yeah, he seemed to have the skill set. I think, Gary, there was just that one pass that went astray, which was costly just before halftime.
Yeah, I think outside of that one pass, I thought his service was actually really good. The props and the forwards were getting the ball on the advantage line. I thought he was making the right choices, hitting the right players at the right time. So I thought it was a very mature performance from him, which, as Declan said, wasn't what we were seeing last year. I think he wasn't quite ready last year, but I think he showed yesterday that when we need to call on him, that he's there, and especially with Simpkin gone now, he's someone that we can rely on.
A few people said in their one words discipline, Eddie. So we had two of the serial offenders, Naden and Seyfarth. But our discipline was very good. Those two must have had a talking to. They had their heads screwed on right. They were a lot better this week. And Seyfarth's game overall as well off the bench, I think he probably, I know it's a big rap, but I thought he probably made the difference between the two teams with his energy and some of his play.
I thought he was in our best three. As Gary would know, I've been a fan of Seyfarth. And I think, Gary, that I think he'd make a lot of good teams, top 17. People might disagree with that. I just think he'd be a similar player. And I think there's rough edges to his game. There's no doubt about that. But I think there's a little bit more than just a toiler. We've often called him a toiler, or he gets the most out of his ability. I think he's got a bit of ability. And he's also got a bit of a hot head, but he did manage to control that yesterday, and he ran for over 140 metres. And opposition knows when he's out there. You can't say that about every West Tigers player that's on the field every week.
Yeah, I thought he was a mensch yesterday, and I know I do give him a little bit of a hard time, and it is mainly around the errors and the lack of discipline that he shows at times, but that wasn't there yesterday. And he actually spent some time at lock and did a little bit of ball playing as well, which I thought he did quite well yesterday. So huge raps for him on his game yesterday. I thought he was fantastic. And if he can keep those errors and that discipline down, he definitely has a spot in that 17.
Yeah, I thought he played really well. He got the balance right with his aggression and kind of his game smarts as well. I just had to laugh though. It just seems like he always gets the ball on 4th or 5th for first receiver, and it's like not even like he's looking for it. It's like the ball is like a magnet to his hands, and he just doesn't know what to do with it. So yeah, if we could just kind of cut that out, I think I agree with Eddie. I think that he would make most teams like top 17 somewhere.
I thought Ruben Porter was good too. He didn't do anything wrong, and I thought Sione Fainu played his best game in first grade as well. Madamua, he seems to really be filling out. Like I looked a couple of times, I thought, who is that? Like from where he was when he debuted a couple of years ago, physically he looks a lot more solid than he did that when he debuted, I think 2 years ago now. Stefano is definitely somebody that needs to be talked about. I put on the West Tigers podcast forum that we need him to go to another level consistently. That was probably, Eddie, I think for Stefano, that was probably one of the best games that he's had for us. And ironically, when we really needed him to step up and be the forward pack leader.
No, 100%. I thought he was best on ground yesterday. I don't know if they give man of the matches, but he was mine. 200 metres, probably the first or second time he's cracked that in his career. It's not all about metres, but I think it was 75 post-contact metres, so there was real energy in his runs. And when we were backs to the wall, he was taking some of those early hit-ups, getting us out of our own end, and you could tell. I don't know where someone lit a fire under him after last week or whether he just decided upon himself he's got to lift his game. But that was hugely impressive. I don't want to go over the top with raps because, you don't want to see him go back to how he's been at times next game. But he was hugely impressive yesterday.
That for me is the thing, Eddie. What he showed yesterday needs to be hit the standard that he's setting himself. What we saw last week was unacceptable for an NRL front rower. What we saw yesterday was the Stefano our club needs, and if he's ever got a desire to play rep football and to play for New South Wales, they're the type of numbers he needs to be pushing out consistently. That's the type of football he needs to be pushing out consistently. Because this year, there's been some fantastic games, but there's been some really poor games. And he's at that point in his career where he needs to iron that out, and he needs to be hitting those really good games a lot more consistently than he has been this season.
And then just in terms of his contract value, I mean, like, he played, like, I agree with Eddie, he was my man of the match as well. Like, he was the difference maker, especially in the second half. But, like, we were playing the Gold Coast Titans, and, you know, we were coming last and they're coming second last. So, you know, you can't play a player, you know, $800K to $1 million when they only step up against, you know, the other bottom four teams. You have to do that against the top teams, and he just hasn't been able to do that. And it's such a shame because, like, there's no reason why he couldn't do that for another team. And, you know, if he does leave at the end of the season, I have no doubt that he'll go on to be a really good player that does fulfill his potential at another club. But it's just, for us, he just hasn't found that consistency yet. And some of the numbers in terms of, like, you know, will a club offer him $1 million? I reckon that's a huge risk for anyone at this point of his career, because, you know, he hasn't shown that he can do that week in, week out, like some of the more higher end props of the game.
There is a report, I only saw the headline that Aidan Fanua-Blake may not be taking up that Cronulla deal next year. So he was around that same sort of figure, maybe a little bit more. Richardson did say that if Stefano doesn't take up the offer, he's got $1 million sitting there. He's actually got $2 million sitting there. He's got plenty of money to spend. We all really regard Stefano. We like that game he played, but that's an interesting choice if you had the choice between those two, wouldn't it? One who's younger, but for about the same money, it'd be hard to say no to Fanua-Blake. But anyway, we'll see what comes of that. I'm going to I think we should all have a little talk about this guy. Declan's probably seen him in action a little bit more than us. We saw him in the trial. I think it was the New Zealand trial. He didn't necessarily set the world on fire that day, but I liked what I saw of Heath Mason. I thought he didn't look out of place for a guy making his debut. What was your thoughts, Declan, on Heath's game?
Yeah, I was really impressed with him, particularly defensively on that edge with Naden. I think that the Gold Coast Titans really threw a lot of, like, traffic that way on the right side, and he didn't miss a tackle. And I think, like, in terms of first grade, I think that's a great sign for him. In the trial, he came on at 5'8", and I was a little bit nervous for this game because I agree with you. I don't think he played that well. I think he has more of a fullback, like, so he can run the ball more. I think, like, I think running the ball is more of a strength compared to passing and kind of setting up for other people. But I think he kept it simple. He was only on for, like, limited minutes, but he just ran the ball, made his tackles, and yeah, I thought he was really good. Really impressed with him. I would like to see him get some game time at fullback, potentially this season, because I think that's where he could really excel. But yeah, really solid debut from him.
Well, Gary, that opens up that issue, is that if you keep unearthing, we haven't seen the best of Latu Fainu. We've got this young Mason. Like, for the halves, there seems to be a logjam. It seems to be even causing us some problems about that logjam of people that want to play in 6 and 7. What would you do if you're a Heath Mason, knowing that probably Buller's got that fullback role? Do you see any other potential opportunities for him in the team? Maybe would you see him as maybe a 14?
Look, he came off the bench yesterday, and I thought he did a fantastic job, and a lot of teams are now carrying him back on the bench, so it's probably not a bad place for him to start. I thought when he came on yesterday, he was really dangerous. He looked like he was going to cause headaches every time he touched the ball. So I potentially he looks like an excellent prospect. And with a few things that Buller still needs to work on, I'm really happy to have someone come through who can compete for that spot and can keep the pressure on Buller. So that's what I'm looking for from him at the moment, is to kind of put that pressure on that fullback spot.
And I just think he's got that right foot step, which is really good. So that kind of unlocks that right side if he was to play fullback or 5'8". Preferably probably maybe fullback in the way that Dylan Edwards has that edge covered, because we haven't really found someone who, like, naturally that's their position on the right side. So yeah, I think it's one to keep an eye on for sure.
Eddie, we're definitely a winger short. We rested Galvin. I'm just throwing this up hypothetically because I think we all probably agree. I think we're all fans of Buller, but as Gary said, there's some aspects of his game that still need some work. Tedesco spent some time on the wing. Would you give Buller a couple of games on the wing and give Heath Mason a go to see how he goes at fullback?
At some point this season, I would, yeah. He may, even if it's Buller maybe playing a bit of centre or something like that, because he just, I don't know Heath Mason. I've never really seen him play much outside of that trial, Gary, where I liked his performance against the Warriors. But huge
raps you gave him, mate. Huge raps.
He's got that old school dog mentality. That's what he strikes me as. He strikes me as someone with no fear. And sometimes it's simple. If you've got no fear and you run the ball hard and you've got a bit of footwork like him, you're going to cause problems. And I was really impressed. That 25 minutes, I saw more from him than I've seen in some players for whole stretches of matches this year. So obviously, when you play full games and if he's going to play fullback, then you're going to be potentially exposed, under high ball, tackling, all these other sorts of things you don't see in a 25-minute bench role. But I would definitely like to see him part of the 17 and then potentially starting games at the back later in the year.
So after watching Galvin play 10 minutes, Eddie, you had him down as a superstar. Do you have any predictions for Heath Mason after the 25 minutes of first grade? I won't remind you what you said after his first trial.
I think he's a first grader, Gary. I'm not going to say he's a superstar, but I think he's a future first grader, which is what we need. We need first graders, not reserve graders.
Going back to that whole, Galvin was rested, as I said. I don't think it's necessarily, an insult to be rested when you're a young player. Like, if we look at Buller, he hasn't had the traditional rugby league background. He hasn't got all of that junior experience. He's played consistent first grade now for 12 months. Like, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to say, look, as much as we respect and regard what you're doing at fullback for the sake of the club, like, let's try a couple of other things as we go into next year. Like, I don't know if that would necessarily be a bad thing. And I think Buller would be pretty good on the wing, or as you said, Eddie, in the centres. So
sorry, Joel. He's a strange player because I sort of, I get a bit more worked up about him, and I was getting worked up yesterday at the game because I'm starting to get really annoyed when he's on those back of those block plays and he keeps running that 45-degree angle towards the sideline. I don't know if that's all his fault, but then I go after the game and I look at the stats and he's run for 207 metres. So I go, wow, that's, on paper that's impressive, but I don't think he's impacting the scoreboard. So I don't want it to be a huge criticism because it's no mean feat to be safe in the NRL at that level as a fullback and not make errors. But I still don't think he's impacting the scoreboard, and I think he's one of the leading reasons we're only scoring a couple of tries a game.
As a whole, our back line takes that 45-degree angle to the sideline. It's not just Buller, and I think the big problem of it is we're still not holding that defence up enough.
But so Heath Mason didn't do it when he come on. But I suppose that was more individual sort of plays. But he straight away bang off the right foot.
Yeah, if you have a look, Buller, we're not giving him the ball in a position to run an individual play. We're really giving him on that sliding play on the block play, which if our halves are going at that 45-degree angle, it makes it really hard for him to straighten once he gets the ball. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt there. And I think after watching Luai play again today, had a fantastic game again today, I think once you have someone like that in your back line, someone who is at least a danger of straightening and going through himself, or he holds the defence up a little bit more. For me, my biggest problem with our defence, with our attack, is we're still not able to straighten it because we're not able to hold up that sliding defence. And I thought it looked really good last week when Matamua was in that lock roll. I thought he was doing a really good job of holding it up. I thought yesterday Matamua did a good job in that lock roll again of holding up that sliding defence. The problem is he made a few really poor defensive errors yesterday, which cost him, and I think he got hooked for one of them in that first stint. I think that's why he came off when he did early in the game. If we can get Matamua to the point where he's playing that lock role, and I think he's got the potential to do it after watching the last couple of weeks, then I think that creates a lot more room for our halves and for Buller to straighten a lot more, and I think that will make a big difference to our attack.
Yeah, I just think that if you look at Kieran Foran and Kenny from the Titans, like Kieran Foran was just digging into the line and creating so much space for the fullback, and then he was able to take advantage of that with his speed. we didn't honestly do that a lot with Bula. And when we actually did do it, I think that he actually managed to put Charlie Saints into space, who managed to put that good kick, and we got a goal line dropout. So I agree that I think that someone like Mason would be ideal because he's explosive and he's got that kind of creativity, and he's also a former 5'8", so he is a little bit more creative. But I think that with Bula, he's probably going through a little bit of second-year syndrome at the moment, but he is getting that experience. So, like, if we were just to kind of take the fullback jersey off of him, like, all that time we put into him, it kind of goes back to square one if we put another rookie at fullback, rather than just trying to keep with him, and hopefully he improves in the things we've been looking for him to improve in. And I agree with Gary. I think Jerome Luai being there next year will hopefully be a huge benefit for him, because he'll take control and he'll tell him where to go, and hopefully the service he gets will be better. But yeah, on the other side of the coin though, if Heath Mason is training better than him, then he should get the fullback spot. I don't think Dream Bull has done anything to have that jersey the long term if someone's better than him.
Yeah, well, and Taruva is pretty keen on playing fullback too, apparently, next year as well. So a few things to discuss. And further to all of that, in the first half of the game, we made only one line break. The Titans made 7 line breaks. That was according to the Fox stats. And, if they had taken a few more of those opportunities, this game would have been very different. It was that scramble defence. It was a couple of times there. Passes didn't go to the right player, et cetera, et cetera. So there is definitely still a lot of work to do with the attack. And I thought, again, we had a number of opportunities in the 20 in the red zone and just couldn't quite ice those opportunities as well. So fantastic to get the win, but certainly can't rest on our laurels in terms of the amount of attacking work that still needs to be done with the team. That's what stood out to me. My highlight of the game was at the 60-minute mark when Samuel Afenu ran over Kieran Foran, got the ball to Olam for that try. We basically, it took us to 12-10, and I was still worried. I thought, no, I can see how this is going to play out, but I thought that was really good. He played well again, Fainu, and we talk about him every week, but did anybody have any thoughts on his game? I thought he was, again, just very consistent. Gary?
Yeah, I thought he was fantastic again yesterday. What I've been noticing over the last couple of weeks is he's making half breaks, and he's just not pulling through that tackle and getting through the line. Yesterday, that run for Kieran Foran, that's where he really pulled through and pushed into that gap. I think we're going to see more of that from him. He's hitting it was a really nice ball from Caesar as well that put him one-on-one with Foran. That's what I think we're going to see over the closing part of this season for him and into the next season. He's going to be a really dangerous runner of the ball. He's got a little bit of speed once he breaks through as well, and he was able to get the ball to Olam to finish off that try. I was really impressed with that play. But I was really impressed with his game yesterday. He's definitely providing the most out of the Fainu brothers so far this year that we've got. But I think he may turn out to be the best signing out of both he and Latu.
I think his effort plays are really good as well. His kick chase on the weekend was absolutely sensational. In fact, there was one where Aiden Caesar put on where it was probably unlucky. If you got a better bounce, he could have scored. So it's just really good, for a young player to have effort areas like that in his kick chase just so well. And when Jerome Luai comes next year, you can just imagine that they're going to have a combination down that left side. And I think we've had a really good player. Honestly, he could be. I think he's been just as good as Lachlan Galvin this season, especially ever since he's went back into that edge.
And we had Nick on the pod on our fan pod the other week, who was absolutely in love with Sam Fainu. I was getting messages last night. He's professing his undying love for that guy now.
And Declan, you stole my point. Luai, that left side specialist, that's exciting. And, put a good winger there on that side as well, and a fullback that's sniffing around to create. I really like that kick that he's been doing, like he did in State of Origin, where he drills the ball back in towards the goalpost. And you've got someone that was Tedesco in that game. He did it today a couple of times in that game against Newcastle. So there's plenty to like. Unfortunately, that's not this year. Discipline, Eddie. When you are a poor team, you have no fat. You have you can't burn anything, or you can't waste anything. If we can stay, you were talking rather negatively about the rest of the year, and I think we're all fairly cautious about what's still ahead of us. There's some really difficult games, but if we can at least fix and consistently fix that discipline, I think that at least there's a few games this year I think we would have been in more if we had been able to stay disciplined like that Dolphins game. Like that should be our challenge for the rest of the year, shouldn't it? It's not necessarily the wins. It's that scrambling defence. It's that working for each other, and it's staying disciplined.
Yeah, well, I mean, yesterday the Gold Coast had no discipline. They beat themselves, didn't they? And that's what we often it's one of the things that obviously on our journey we've got to get better at is the games we win. It's when opposition almost beat themselves. But you're right, it was better yesterday, the discipline, and that's going to be a marker for Benji, particularly the last 11 games this year. But I wanted to give a rap to Aiden Caesar because I think he makes a big difference to this side. It's not necessarily big scoreboard difference, but just in terms of being disciplined and in terms of the talk on the field, I was right down near the rail. And, man, he really puts in, like, kick chases, tackling. He's not just a halfback, fancy halfback. Like, he's all about the little dirty plays, gritty plays. And, he's played 9 games this year. We've won 3 of those 9. And I'd say the 3 that we won, he's been in our top 3 or 4 players in the field. Obviously, Luai's the main man next year, and Lockie Galvin's going to be the guy at 6, I assume. But I'd love to have Aiden Caesar for another year, even if he's, the 14 or the reserve grade halfback, because there's injuries every single season. And I'm sure, like a club like Penrith, given Nathan Cleary's injuries and plays Origin every year, you'd be looking at someone like Aiden going, that's a guy we can bank on for 6 or 8 games a year.
And for me, the biggest role, I'd love to keep him for next year because you have a look at our reserve grade side this year. It's been getting pumped every week. It's got a lot of young guys in there. And
he's a pro, isn't he, Gary? He's just a pro.
Yeah. If you could get someone like Aiden Caesar to spend the majority of the year playing in that reserve grade side, to bring the young guys that we've got coming through, we're talking about our future, and to guide them through next season, I think it could be huge for the club. And I'd go as far as offering to transition him into some kind of coaching role following that year. He's got to be close to retirement. We can get him for a year there and then maybe get him as an assistant coach with the reserve grade side or one of the lower grades and provide a pathway for him to transition into coaching. He seems like a guy to me that would appeal to. So I would love to see him stick around next year and really lead those young guys around in reserve grade for the most part. But then you do have him as backup because if Luai's playing at the same level this time next year, he's going to be missing for 3 games for State of Origin and things like that. So having an experienced guy around who will be 34, 35 years old, I think could be a godsend for that reserve grade side next season.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it, Declan? Because the shredder has been fired up. We're going to lose. We've already lost a little bit of reasonably experienced players in Kapoa and Simpkin. They've both played around 50 first-grade games. If we look at the shredder, probably the majority of the guys that we will be moving on, the Papalis and things, they are more experienced. You would think at this stage that reserve grade team next year is going to, again, be made up of youngsters.
Yeah, and like the reserve grade team we put out at Leichhardt was, it was exactly that. There was tons of flag players. It was a really young team, and that's probably why it kind of blew out in the second half. But yeah, I would love to keep Aiden Caesar as well. But with Bud Sullivan, sidestepping the shredder, unfortunately, it might be a difficult one. But he wouldn't cost too much money, surely. Maybe a 1-year deal. But yeah, I agree with Eddie. I think a lot of clubs could probably see his utility value, and he might go somewhere where he'll probably get more first grade games now. But I hope not. I hope he stays because I agree with what everyone's saying. Because whenever he's played well, we've usually been quite competitive, and he's also just really good defensively on the edge, which I think is a big deal for a half. Like sometimes he comes up, and he misses a tackle because he gets bumped off, but I think his intent is always good, and he always leads the line. And he's just a veteran player, and we just need a lot of those because we've got a really young team at the moment, and the more kind of adults in the room, I think the better as the season goes on.
Now, I believe there's an option for next year for him in his contract, so I'm not sure. Is anyone aware of whose side that option falls on?
I think it's a mutual option, isn't it?
Okay, yeah, well, they're not of much benefit. I was hoping maybe as a club option they could kind of engage that and keep him next year, but I think it'd be beneficial if we can keep him around.
Eddie, I'm going to borrow your shiny new game. Who would you rather? So Jaden Sullivan or Aiden Caesar next year?
Oh, Joel, you're laughing because it's a silly question. I don't have to answer that, do I? It's not Jaden Sullivan. That's a clue.
Mate, that's about the level of some of the ones you did on Wednesday night, though.
Because I was trying to spread positivity, Gary. You know that. I was trying to be positive to Benji, so I was putting him up against some duds.
I was just making the point, Eddie, that I'm not on a cruise ship somewhere. I'm actually here and listening and working.
I'll say your reception's pretty good for that. You must have found a little internet area.
Exactly. The Fiji internet, the Fiji NBN's not too bad. All right, should we move away from the game? I think we've covered it pretty well. Third win of the year, so good to see. Relief is the word. Thank goodness for that. 9-game losing streak come to an end. On to Canberra this week, and I'm sure that you will discuss it on the midweek pod. But the Campbelltown Hoodoo, I think it's an important game for the club, Gary. We need to at least be competitive. The Raiders, we've tested them, we've pushed them a few times in recent memory. Sometimes they completely steamroll us and they play that big physical game, and we just can't match it. But I think it's a really, really important game for the club to be competitive in.
Yeah, 100%. It'd be nice to go back-to-back for wins. We haven't done that in a while. So, but I also think for the fan base, we've had that 9-week period of where everything was doom and gloom, and last week was horrible. So I think it'll be really good for the fan base to get that, but it'll also be really good. Now, we're playing Canberra, and this is Canberra's closest home game, so I'd expect there to be quite a few travelling Canberra fans. But it'd be nice to get another good crowd out there this weekend, and I think it's about time. We've had we had a sellout there earlier in the year. I think it'd be really good if we could get a really strong performance out there, because if we're going to continue to get people to come along to games in Campbelltown, we need to get a win, and that's the biggest importance for me this weekend, is to reward that community for coming out earlier in the season and hopefully coming out again this weekend.
It's the Sunday 4:00 game, so it's always a good game to get along to. We've got other things to discuss, but let's just have a quick while on in that same area. Gary, the ambush event is on before that.
Yeah, it is on. I haven't checked the times that it's on, so Steve's going to be on here on Wednesday night, so I'm sure he can give us a little bit more details. But I'd expect it to be out at the beer shed around 1:30 to 2:00 kickoff start time for that. We're hoping to get a guest from the club. I'm pretty sure we'll at least have someone along at that event to come and speak. So if you're heading out to the game, head out there a bit early, get across to the beer shed, come and meet Steve. He'd love to meet you, or give him a big hug. And, join us for that, and then we'll all head across and watch the game.
The details would be on the ambush page on Facebook.
They would be?
Yes, exactly.
I probably should have checked that before we came on tonight, but I didn't do that.
Where would you be without Kelly? I think Kelly's keeping you organised.
Oh yeah, they just told me what time to show up.
Exactly. You're the star, Just the limo pulls up and Gary comes out in the chairman's lounge. Apparently, let's get onto that topic. Richardson apparently addressing members, very special members. I didn't get an invite. I don't know if Eddie or Declan got an invite. And obviously, I'm, chuck steak. But anyway, he had a few things to say, Gary, about Fox Sports and the Telegraph.
Yeah, I was actually really impressed. He spoke really well. He spoke very firmly regarding some of the stuff that was coming out of especially NRL 360 last week, and the involvement in player managers around our club over the past couple of years. He spoke for about 5 minutes. He spoke very passionately about our club. He started by saying he's been at clubs down the bottom before. He's been at South Sydney when they were struggling, at Penrith when they were struggling. He was over in the Super League when the club he was over there with was struggling. And he's never seen the type of media coverage that our club gets. And the vitriol directed towards our club he has never seen before. The big point that I got from what he said yesterday, and it has been reported in an article today, but the big point for me was he stated that for too long this club has been run by NRL 360 and player managers, and that finished last week.
Yep.
So and that was pretty much a drop the mic. That was the end of his discussion. He got off stage and pretty much walked out of the room. And for me, that was the key message, is that this club isn't going to be pushed around by player managers as it has been in the past. It's not going to be pushed around by NRL 360, which he named specifically. And I guess an extension on that is it's not going to be pushed around by Buzz Rothfield. And when you have a look at a couple of the articles he's even come out with since the game yesterday, it's time that our club did stand up to him, and I think Richo's going to do that. So I was really impressed with how he spoke about our club yesterday.
Yeah, Joel, I think you mentioned last week, I think it was a good point that you said, Richardson had been away for a few weeks and sort of the club had lost its way. But, he was the guy during the week that got me a little bit fired up. Straight away, he was on the front foot when he was back on Monday. He shut down the Galvin stuff within a week. He's not afraid to take on some of these hack journos. And the good thing for him is it's not just, aimless words like it was with the previous admin. He's actually backs it up with actions, So, I just think he's probably I was close to using him as my one word for this week, but he didn't pull on a jersey. But I just think he's the man we need. And, there's possibly going to be unpopular decisions like I know Gary's hinted coming, but I'm willing to back him because he's a doer, much like, it reminds me a bit of Volandis. He's got that sort of mongrel in him. He's probably not the most popular bloke, even within his own four walls at times. He probably rubs people the wrong way, but, he demands results.
And you have a look at the feeling amongst our fan base and the stories around Lachie Galvin this time last week. And then Richo goes out and speaks to the family and has a meeting with the family. And then we get the Lachie Galvin article that comes out saying that he never wanted to leave the club. He was always staying with the club. The big one out of that article for me was the stating that him walking around the change room saying he wanted to out of the club were lies. And for a young guy to come out and say that, I thought was fairly impressive. Now, I'm sure there was some agitation from Lachie and his family about moving on. But you can tell from that article, regardless, that's been dealt with this week. And that's what's impressive for me, is that I think this time last year, if that article had come out, we probably would have been seeing Lachie Galvin heading somewhere else. And now we've got someone like Shane Richardson at our club. It's been sorted out in a week. And hopefully it stays sorted out.
Just restored some of my faith in the game, Joel. Seeing some of those ex-players come out and back us, like Andrew Johns. And Lachie Galvin, you can tell he's so impressionable. You could tell he was pretty sheepish yesterday. He was just sitting right in front of us. And you can tell he's just an 18-year-old that's, the last thing he hears is something and the last thing he heard was, Andrew Johns said, you should stay and turn the Tigers around. And he said, I could be the kid to turn the Tigers around. So I was I was just really impressed by the way Richardson sort of handled that. I don't think he was, overwrought, which, administrators of the past might have been.
And I know he said Andrew Johns saying that is what convinced him to kind of really stick with it. But that's a story we have to be selling these young guys coming through. We're a club that has been struggling for a long time. We need to be selling that message to these juniors that we have coming through, a number of them who are coming into a side that's maybe looking at its third wooden spoon. We have to sell that they're the people to turn this club around. They're the people who can get this club back to semi-finals football, and what that means to our club and what it means to them personally. I think that word legacy is probably not a bad one to use, and we need to sell that message really well to the young players we've got coming through. And I think at least we've got Shane Richardson, who I think is much better placed to sell that message than our previous administration.
I like what Scott Sattler said. He really went into bat for the club, which was great to see. But he said it to Lachlan Galvin, he said, don't be the problem, be the solution. Yeah, the problem with not just West Tigers, but other low-placed clubs is that these guys want to go straight into, to be fair, someone else's success. If you go and replace Luai at Penrith next year, hypothetically, that's not your success. You're just on the coattails of all the people that have put those systems in, all the players that have created that success. Whereas actually, be the solution, be one of the players that turns this club around. And just on Shane Richardson and on organisations, like, I think if you're the boss of Melbourne, I reckon you could be like George Costanzo. Remember he had the bed under his desk? Like, you could probably sleep there half the day because the place just pretty much runs itself. But the West Tigers, I think because we are the worst club in the competition, arguably, you need the best administrator. Like, there's so much hard work to be done. There is so much effort. There is so much that needs to be done differently to what has been done in the past, if that makes sense. So you need someone who is just proficient across all areas of running a rugby league club. And I think we've got probably the guy that would be in the top 3 admins in the game. So we're absolutely blessed. And we talk about the review. And if we didn't do the review, if we didn't stamp our feet, we wouldn't have Shane Richardson. So, I think it's hard sometimes. Like last week, we all felt deflated, but we're heading in the right track. I'm sure that we are. We just got to, unfortunately, it's hard to ask a fan base that's been struggling for success and been through what we've been through for 13 years to have a little bit of patience. But unfortunately, at the moment, we've planted the seeds and we've got to wait for the crop to grow, Gary.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Penrith a moment ago, and for these young guys, I think that's the perfect model to kind of point them to, because Penrith were struggling for a long time as well. Not as long as us and not as badly as us, but they were struggling, and they had the young guys come through, and they were able to change that direction of their club. And I think that's what we have the potential to do, and that's where I'd be speaking to those young guys coming through about, is that you can do this together. And you have a look. There's been 4 or 5 of those Harold Matts players make their debut this season from that team that won the comp a couple of years ago, and you got to sell that as a group they can change this club. But you're exactly right about Shane Richardson being the person to lead this club forward, Joel. I think that is potentially the biggest signing the club has ever had, and there's going to be, as I've said a number of times, there's going to be decisions made that we don't like, but the decisions will be made. And I think that was the problem in the past, is that because they were difficult decisions to make, they just weren't made. And sometimes it doesn't matter what decision it is. It's about making a decision and putting all your resources behind it and getting everyone moving in that same direction that makes a difference. And we just haven't had that before.
I think that's the massive challenge for like a team like the Tigers at the bottom of the ladder compared to a team like Penrith, where players and player managers will want like their players and their clients in that system because it's one of the best in the NRL. So they're more than willing to stay, develop, and then maybe when they're a bit older, they can leave. And then because they've played for Penrith or they've been in that squad, they'll get big money somewhere else. Like, it's happened a few times. But for us, it just seems like the exact opposite. Like, as soon as there's not a clear path to first grade for someone like the Large brothers, they signed 5-year deals like last year or the year before, and now they want out because there's not that immediate path to first grade. Like, we have to turn that around, like make these juniors want to stay and want to be in the system because they see themselves as developing the best, even though, they might have to fight for a position in first grade, like somewhere down the track. But they know that if they stay, they will be better players for it, because at the moment, I don't think that's the perception amongst the players. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that Richardson needs to address. And yeah, like, just on the player managers, like, seriously, like, Lachlan Galvin, they're giving everything to him. He wouldn't be in this position if it wasn't for the Tigers. And then, it just takes his player manager just to kind of stir the pot a little bit. And then, it just all goes up in flames. So, yeah, as everyone said, hopefully it's settled for now. But yeah, I think that's the problem, trying to change that perception amongst the NRL community that, people can achieve their best at the West Tigers.
But Penrith weren't always that system. It wasn't that long ago that they were a side that was struggling, and what did change for them was they had a group of young guys come through who were in it for their community. That is a big part of it. They wanted to improve the prospects of the community that a lot of them had grown up in and spent a lot of time in. And that's, you're right, that's the challenge. We've got to create that desire in our club. But that's how I'd partly sell it, is not looking at what Penrith is now, is looking at what Penrith was 8 to 10 years ago and the position they were in 8 to 10 years ago, and how the group of Nathan Cleary and Luai and Crichton, how all these players came through together and had the right sort of players mixed in around them, and how that's changed the club. That's what we've got to build. And we've got a good pathway of one lot of players coming through. The next step of that is then getting the next lot coming through, and that's where Penrith is now, is that they just have wave after wave of those junior talents coming through and those strong junior sides coming through, that they're able to pick and choose where they let players go. But we've got to get to that first part first, where we've got a group of players that come through, those juniors we've got coming through that first lot, wanting to stay here and wanting to fight for this club and wanting to make this club better. Because that's what Penrith had, and that's why I would use them as an example.
Well, Gary, does that alarm you? Because this is just perception, and I'm very well aware that Lachlan Galvin is an 18-year-old kid, and this isn't any criticism of him, but from everything I've seen, it seems that the club is an avenue for him to achieve his individual success. He doesn't really see as being someone who just wants to play for the West Tigers, someone who just wants to win with the West Tigers. He just wants to be someone, in my opinion, who just succeeds, and if it's at another club, so be it. And that's not really what you're describing at the moment. So does that make you a little bit worried for the future with him?
That's why when we spoke about Benji Marshall as coach the other day, I said I'd be keeping him on as long as he has those younger guys on site. So as long as that group of players that's coming through underneath are really supportive of the direction, and they don't see it as their development's not being managed properly through the coach, then that's why I'm keeping Benji Marshall in that role. I think it's part of the club's job to sell that to these young guys. And I know there's families and there's different individuals involved, but I think as a club, we've got to sell to these guys coming through. I think that legacy term that Andrew Johns used in his thing on his podcast through the week is really important, and describe to them what it can mean for their career if they can turn this club around. Because I think it's just a generational thing now where a lot of young guys come through and they want the quickest way to the top, and that may be jumping and swapping teams, because I don't think that there's the loyalty involved in the game now, because there's a business in the game. But we've got to sell that message. That's down to our club to sell that message. And I think Richo's probably a really good person to do that. And I think by things like running the community programs that we're looking at starting up over the next couple of months, that kind of puts you into that community a lot more and makes people a lot more probability of staying loyal being higher. But it's all about the message we're selling to those young guys, and I think that's the most important part on that at the moment.
Eddie, just listening to the guys, but what comes to mind is that, every club has the same issues. Every club wants to hold on to their best young players. I think if you're winning and you start to perform, then I think a lot of this goes away. If you know that you start the season and you're a pretty darn good chance that you're going to finish in the top 4, and you've got good established halves, and there's some guy killing it in the SG ball, and that guy goes to Newcastle to take up on it. It's not the end of the world, is it? You know what I mean? If it's, once we build the success, I think a lot of that goes away. We just got to get there. But winning changes everything in a football club, I think.
100%. You said it there, winning. I'm sure those Penrith kids, when they were 16, 17, didn't just decide, let's do it for the community, let's do it for Penrith. They saw Phil Gould come in. They saw some results, things started to snowball. And, that can happen here. I'm not saying we're going to win a comp in 2 years, but I'm saying you get, the force of Shane Richardson's personality and someone like Jerome Luai, who's got a real force of personality. And I think that's going to be a key factor next year, not just his performance, but how he lifts guys at training and the standards he demands. And obviously you've got to win more games, because if this time next year and the year after, if we've won another 4 games, of course he's going to want to go elsewhere.
And that's a hard part, because a lot of that winning of games and a lot of that success is tied on those young guys coming through. So we need those young guys committed and wanting to be here and staying here to kind of achieve that success. That's a difficult spot we find ourselves in now. And that's why I think you're right. Jerome Luai, I think he's going to drive that side of our club to another level. And I think Richo has a great opportunity to do that as well. And it's really important that Benji Marshall is able to do that. Our coach needs to be heavily involved in that. And I like what I've seen for most of the season in that regard. I think the way you're speaking about the club and about our players during the off season and early season, I think was great. My concern is hearing the rumblings of players, of those young guys wanting out of the club. That's the worry that I have for it, and that's my only worry with Benji Marshall as coach is we need him selling that vision as well.
Yeah. Look, I mean, and the thing is too, is that if you go back to Tedesco is a generational talent. Moses is a very, very good first grade player, just picked again for State of Origin. You could see the difference that he makes in that team. But if we'd had a couple of guys that were coming through that were better than who we ended up replacing them with, if that makes sense, it wouldn't have been that big an issue. It's not just that we lost them, it's that we didn't have that development and that system in place to replace those players. And that's why we're all so gun-shy about losing someone like Galvin. But, maybe in a couple of years we'll have 3 or 4 other guys that were like, well, okay, well, if you don't want to be here, we've got other options. It's not the end of the world. So we'll wait and see. Just on that, on Galvin and Luai, Galvin was quoted in that article saying he spoke to Luai after the game against Penrith in Bathurst, and Luai said, something along the lines to him, "I'll be there to help next year," which is really good. Like that's what you want to hear, that someone's knows that they're going to come and they're going to put their best foot forward. And I'm sure that Luai, while he can't say it publicly at the moment, it would be an exciting challenge, I think, for him. And if the players get behind him, and by the look of it, he's going to be the captain. Next year could be quite different. But anyway, that's a fair way off in the horizon.
Not that far off, Joel. It's not that far off.
I know, but there's still a lot of football to be played this year.
Just on Luai, I've been so happy to just surprised the way he's played halfback the last 2 weeks. Like, he absolutely killed it today, and it wasn't just flashes of individual play. It was 4-line dropouts. He set up a couple of tries. I know he always likes to step back in off his left foot, but he did the other thing today. They were all waiting for the left foot step, and he sort of showed and going and burned him on the outside. So I think he's got, he's showing his footy IQ now that he's playing 7. And I was worried watching him play 5'8", but this has been a relief seeing him play 7 the last 3 weeks. I'm not going to say he's going to. It's obviously going to be a massive challenge coming into our side with all that Penrith system set up. But, he's been excellent last month.
If you look at the West Tigers history, though, I don't think we've ever had a player come in who the other players would have to respect as much as Luai. Like, nobody that we've ever bought has done as much in the game as Luai. Like, I don't know, who are some of our biggest signings? Gareth Ellis to a degree. Adam Blair, Appy won a couple of comps, but somebody who's coming off 3 or maybe 4 premierships, there's absolutely no way that they're not going to follow him and listen to him and respect him.
Well, and the fact that he's a player in a key position, I think a guy like Lottie Takiri, when he came into the club, he had a wonderful history in rugby league and in rugby, and I think he would have had that respect coming into our club. But he wasn't in a key position. And I think having that sort of personality in a key position, I think is going to do wonders for our club. And everything you hear about him is how hard he drives standards. And I think Appy's a guy that drives standards really hard as well. And having those two together guiding our club next year, I think is going to make a really big difference. And if we want to lift those standards, they're the type of guys you want in and around your club.
Yeah, I think that Appy, he seems to me to be like a leader by example. And, obviously, those are really crucial. But I think someone like Jerome Blue, I think he's got a spray in him. And, he'll hold people to account. And I think that's just something we might be lacking a little bit at the moment. And as Joe said, he's got that pedigree. He can come into the club and kind of earn the respect of everyone, especially amongst Polynesian players, because, what he managed to achieve for Samoa. So, I think that he's going to be a game changer for us. And, I always thought he was going to be a really good player for us, but even playing 7, I think he surprised me how good he's been. So hopefully, he just is that kind of circuit breaker that we've been talking about for all these years.
It's a different example, and not necessarily a key position, but all the Cronulla people inside that club talk about how someone like Dale Finucane was massive for their club and just setting standards, and not necessarily what he did on Sunday. And he was at the back end of his career, so I'm expecting Luai to be good on Sundays. But just what he did on Monday to Friday in terms of lifting, the intensity at training, extras, every sort of little professionalism. Like as a young player, you couldn't get away with being 80 or 90% because you don't want to let that guy down. So I'm hoping Luai can be that, and I'd have no hesitation in making him the sole captain next year. And that's nothing against Appy. Appy's been great, but I think he looks exhausted after games, not just on the field, but in press conferences. And I think he would, relish just going back to being that number 9 playing under Luai.
When you look at the team, sorry, Gary, when you look at the team for 25, there just looks to be maybe at this stage the lack of a forward leader. That's the only thing. If I could wave that magic wand, a forward leader, a James Fisher-Harris type guy that's going to take the game by the scruff of the neck week in, week out. Gary, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, I think that's something we've been missing for a long time now. But just back on Luai for a second, I even really like his answers when he's asked about how we're performing this year. I love that he turns around and says he doesn't care. There's just an arrogance and a confidence to it that I don't think it really matters to him how we're performing this year. I think he expects to walk in and change that next year. And for me, I like that. I like that arrogance about him because it's something we need.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. A lot more optimistic than the same podcast last week.
Wasn't it fun?
Yes. What a difference winning makes.
It was funny how Declan was available all of a sudden this Sunday. He hasn't been available the last 5 or 6 Sundays, but geez, he was quick to say I'll be on tonight.
Mate, I'm just so happy that you missed me. I can tell how happy you are that I'm back.
Well, the midweek one, Joel, it's going to be, I don't know, Gary might know when the cut-off for the 3-year stadium plan, but we've been talking about Richardson and, he's not afraid to be the bogeyman, and it'd be interesting to see because Leichhardt Oval, there's still something there in it. Like, we've won 11 of our last 61 games as a club, but we've won our last 3 games at Leichhardt Oval. So we're all underdogs in those games, not like we were favourites. So it's funny just how first-year players talk about it there. And I feel sorry for Campbelltown because it doesn't have the same reputation. But guys like Aiden Caesar and Appy, like you can tell, Appy said, I lift when I walk in the gates there. So it'd be very interesting to see what Richardson does. I'm sure he's not going to have his mind changed by one 18-10 win over the Gold Coast. But given the funding news and the performances, we'll see what happens there.
Well, you'd think that if the $40 million does come through, which is promised, that construction wouldn't start, you would think, for at least a year. So I think there's the short term would be what happens in 25, and then the medium and longer term is when it's all done, what standard is that at? Can it do 6 games a year? Maybe not. So does it do 3 or 2 or 1 or not? Not at all. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm sure, look, I don't think they would have got 40 million, Gary, if there wasn't some sort of, maybe not, written in ink, some sort of commitment from the West Tigers to play there.
So Shane Richardson did speak a little bit about that yesterday.
Okay.
And he basically said that ground wouldn't have got the funding without the West Tigers.
Right.
Without West Tigers' involvement, it just wouldn't have been there. He did speak a lot more about the ability to host NRLW games there. I think we'll see games there moving forward after the development. I think if it was going to be a major commitment, you probably need at least a bit more money. Because for mine, as I've said a number of times, I don't think it raises capacity quite enough to be playing there as a majority games being held there. I love the place. I'd love for us to play every single game there. It's my favourite place in the world to watch football. But what Shane Richardson wants, not what I want. I see us not playing a huge amount of games there. I'd love to be wrong, because that's where I want us to play. But I expect that there'll at least be a major stadium to hold the majority of the games moving forward.
Which will mean the end of guys being able to take their shirts off and sliding down in the mud down the hill.
I saw that guy.
I thought it was Eddie. Like when I was standing on the other side of the field, and I'm thinking Eddie's had a few too many, and he's put out the slip and slide.
Yeah, does anybody else find it slightly ironic that the Wayne Pearce Hill has a big bar on it where people get drunk? Like, given that Junior doesn't drink, Declan?
Yeah, I actually saw that guy leaving the game, and he was talking about how he liked his chances of getting into the pub, even though he didn't have a shirt on and he was just muddy everywhere. So I would love to know how he's feeling today after that performance.
Exactly. Bit of fun. All right. Thank you, guys. Midweek pod. And don't forget the tickets still available for the trip to Newcastle. August 11 Sunday game, picking up in Lumia, picking up at the Centre of Excellence in Concord. Tickets are available. Just fill out the booking form that's on the West Tigers podcast website, and we'd love it if you could join us. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, boys.
The West Tigers podcast is brought to you by the West Tigers Podcast Forum. Have your say on anything to do with the West Tigers, westtigerspodcast.com.au.